Taeyang did not sleep for 3 days. He spent every hour checking his data, running new tests, and making absolutely sure he was right. Mirai helped him, though she kept looking worried. Yunwoo watched them both and said nothing. On the 4th day, Taeyang made his decision. He requested a meeting with the Union Council. It took 2 weeks to arrange. The council did not meet often, and they did not like surprises. The council met in a huge chamber that floated in space between 3 different star systems. It was neutral ground, built specifically so no species had home advantage. The chamber could hold 10,000 beings, and today it was almost full. News had spread that a human had discovered something important about the Veils. Some species were curious. Others were suspicious. Humans were still very new to galactic politics, and many aliens did not trust them yet. Taeyang stood at the speaker's platform looking out at thousands of alien faces. Mirai stood behind him for support. Hyunwoo stood further back, his hand near his weapon, watching everything. Also in the audience was Yuna Choi, a human communications specialist who had flown in specially for this meeting. She was 29 and had spent the last week preparing for the public relations disaster that might follow. She sat with her team, ready to manage whatever happened next. Next to Yuna sat Jiwon Lee, a 56-year-old historian who studied first contact situations. He had seen many meetings like this go wrong. He did not look optimistic. Taeyang began speaking. He explained his discovery simply and clearly. He showed the sensor data. He demonstrated the holographic projectors. He proved that the Veils were maintained technology, not ancient magic. For the first 5 minutes, everyone listened quietly. Then the chamber exploded into noise. Half the species present began shouting. Some were angry. Some were scared. Some simply refused to believe what they were hearing. Veshk, the Heckle ambassador, stood up and accused Taeyang of lying. His crystal body rang with anger like a bell. "You insult the architects," Veshk said. "You insult 3,000 years of faithful service. You come to us, a species barely older than children, and claim to understand what we do not. This is arrogance beyond measure." Other species agreed with Veshk. They did not want to believe the Veils were ordinary technology. It was easier to believe in ancient mysteries than to accept that they had been fooled for so long. But some species listened. A few scientists asked for copies of the data. They wanted to check it themselves. This made Veshk even more angry. The meeting ended in chaos. 20 species walked out, refusing to continue. The council called for a recess while everyone calmed down. That evening, Veshk came to see Taeyang privately. The human was surprised but invited the ambassador into his quarters on the Unity. They sat across from each other in silence for a long moment. "You are right," Veshk finally said. His voice was quiet, no longer ringing with anger. "The Veils are not architect technology." "Not anymore," Taeyang leaned forward. "You knew? My family has maintained the Veils for 400 generations. Of course we know. We have replaced every part of them a dozen times over. But we never speak of it." Veshk's crystal body seemed to dim. "Do you know why?" Taeyang waited. "Because fear is stronger than any force field," Veshk said. "As long as species believe the Veils cannot be broken, they do not try. As long as they believe the architects are watching, they behave. Remove the mystery and you remove the fear. Remove the fear and you invite war. So you let everyone believe a lie," Taeyang said. "We maintained the peace," Veshk corrected. "For 3,000 years we kept the galaxy safe. But now I have told everyone the truth, yes." Veshk stood up. "And now we will see what happens when walls fall and fear is removed. I hope you are ready for what comes next, human." After Veshk left, Mirai came out from the next room where she had been listening. "He is right to be worried," she said. "Fear has been holding things together. Then we need to give them something better than fear." Taeyang said, "We need to give them reason to trust each other. How? I do not know yet. But humans have done it before. We had wars for thousands of years. Then we learned to build bridges instead of walls." That same night, far across the galaxy, a Terek military commander named Krish was holding a secret meeting. The Terek were an insectoid species with sharp minds and long memories. They remembered every slight, every defeat, every loss, and they remembered the Solemn, their ancient enemies. For 1,000 years, the Veils had kept Terek and Solemn apart. But now this human had revealed the truth. The Veils were just machines. They could be broken. They could be crossed. Krish looked at the battle plans displayed on the screens around him. His officers waited for orders. The Heckle are confused and weak right now, Krish said. Their faith is broken. They will not maintain the veils properly. There will be weak points. We will find them. And then, one of his officers asked, then we remind the Solemn why they should have stayed behind their wall. Back at the council station, Yuna Choi was working 20 hours a day trying to control the panic. Species were demanding answers. Some wanted the veils strengthened immediately. Others wanted them removed entirely. A few species threatened to leave the Union altogether. Yuna sent message after message trying to calm everyone down. But it was like trying to stop a flood with her hands. Jiwan Lee, the historian, came to see her office late one night. He looked tired. I have seen this pattern before, he said. In human history, when people discover their leaders have been lying to them, even for good reasons, trust breaks down. Everything falls apart. What happened in those cases? Yuna asked. Sometimes war. Sometimes revolution. Sometimes both. Jiwan sat down heavily. But sometimes someone finds a new way forward. A way to rebuild trust. That is what we need now. A week after Taeyang's presentation, sensors detected unusual activity near the Tarek Solemn Veil. The Heckle maintenance teams had been slow to respond, still recovering from their crisis of faith. A weak point had developed in the veil. Hyunwoo was the first to spot the problem. He was monitoring security channels when he intercepted a coded Tarek transmission. He could not read all of it, but he understood enough. He ran to find Taeyang and Mirai. They were in a meeting with other human delegates, but he burst in anyway. The Tarek are planning an attack, he said without preamble, through the veil. They know it is weak. Everyone in the room froze. When? Taeyang asked soon. Maybe days, maybe hours. Taeyang stood up quickly. We need to warn the council. The council will take weeks to decide what to do, Hyunwoo said. Thousands of Solemn will die while they debate. Mirai looked at Taeyang. This is because of what you revealed. Because you knocked on that wall and proved it was hollow. Taeyang felt the weight of her words. She was right. He had broken down one wall, and now violence was rushing through the gap. Fear had kept the peace, and he had taken away the fear. Then I need to fix it, he said quietly. How? Hyunwoo asked. Taeyang looked out the window at the stars, at the invisible veils that separated species from each other, at the walls built by fear and maintained by lies. I knocked on one wall and it fell, he said. Now I need to build something better in its place, something that does not need fear to hold it up. But first they had to stop a war. The Unity began moving towards Solemn space at full speed. Other human ships followed. They were not a military force, but they were all that stood between the Tarek and their ancient enemies. As the ship jumped to faster-than-light speed, Taeyang stood in his quarters thinking. He had wanted to break down walls and bring species together. Instead, he had opened a door that let violence through. Mirai found him there, staring out at the streaking stars. Walls keep things in as well as out, she said softly. Sometimes that is good. Then we need better walls, Taeyang said. Walls with doors. Walls you can choose to keep closed or open. Not prisons, but homes. Can you build something like that? He thought about it. About human history. About the times humans had torn down walls and built bridges. About the times it had worked and the times it had not. I can try, he said. But first we stop this war. The Unity raced through space toward a confrontation that could tear the galaxy apart. Behind them, the Council argued and debated. Ahead of them, the Tarek prepared for battle. And somewhere in between, the Solemn waited, unaware of the danger coming toward them. The walls were falling. Now everyone would see what happened when fear no longer held the galaxy together. The attack came at dawn, Solemn time. 300 Tarek warships punched through the weakened veil like it was paper. The Solemn colonies on the border worlds had no warning. The first missiles struck while families were eating breakfast. Taeyang watched the attack on the Unity's main screen, feeling sick. This was his fault. He had revealed the truth about the veils, and now people were dying. The Unity was still 3 hours away from Solemn space. Too far to help, too far to stop what was happening. Hyunwoo was coordinating with other human ships in the area. There were 12 of them, all civilian vessels. Against 300 Tarek warships, they were nothing, but they were moving to intercept anyway. We need a plan, Hyunwoo said. We cannot fight them directly, we do not fight them, Taeyang said. We get in their way, that will get us killed. Maybe, but it might also slow them down. Buy time for the Solemn to evacuate. On the screen, another colony went dark as the Terek weapons found their target. Thousands of lives gone in an instant. Mirai was contacting the Solemn Defense Forces, trying to warn them. But the Solemn were in chaos. They had not fought a war in 800 years. Their military was rusty and unprepared. A new voice came over the communication system. It was Belash, a Solemn Defense Coordinator. His voice was filled with panic and anger. "This is your fault, human. You broke the veils. You let them through." Taeyang felt the accusation like a physical blow. "He is right," he said quietly to Mirai. "No," Mirai said firmly. "The Terek chose to attack. That is on them, not you." But Taeyang knew she was being kind. He had removed the wall that kept these species apart. Now they were at war. A young woman named Sora Nam was working at the tactical station. She was 27 and had joined the diplomatic service only a year ago. But she had studied military strategy as a hobby, and now that knowledge was needed. "I have an idea," Sora said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. The Terek are moving in a standard attack formation. They expect either no resistance or direct confrontation. "What if we do neither?" "Explain," Hyunwoo said. "We position our ships in their path, but we do not shoot. We just sit there with shields up. They will have to go around us or through us. Either way, it slows them down, and it makes them choose to kill unarmed civilians on purpose." "They might just shoot through us," Hyunwoo said. "Maybe. But the whole galaxy is watching now. If they murder unarmed human civilians, every species in the Union will turn against them." It was a gamble. A huge one. But they had no other options. "Do it," Taeyang said. The 12 human ships moved into position between the Terek fleet and the next Solemn colony. They turned off their weapons and raised their shields to maximum. Then they waited. On board the Unity, everyone was silent. They could see the Terek fleet approaching. 300 warships against 12 civilian vessels. Taeyang opened a communication channel to the Terek fleet. "This is Taeyang Kim of the Human Diplomatic Service. We are unarmed. We ask that you stop your attack and talk." The response came from Commander Krish himself. "Move aside, human. This does not concern you. It concerns all of us," Taeyang replied. "The galaxy is watching. If you attack unarmed ships, you lose any claim to justice." There was a long pause. The Terek fleet slowed but did not stop. "You showed us the walls were false," Krish said. "You removed our fear. Did you think there would be no consequences?" "I thought species could choose peace instead of war," Taeyang said. "Then you thought wrong." The Terek fleet began to move around the human ships. They were not going to shoot, but they were not going to stop either. Sora was already working on a new plan. She moved the human ships again, staying between the Terek and their target. It became a slow dance in space, with human ships constantly repositioning to block the Terek advance. They bought 17 minutes. 17 minutes for Solemn civilians to evacuate. 17 minutes for the Solemn military to finally organize a response. When the Solemn defense fleet finally arrived, it was smaller than the Terek force, but it was enough to make the Terek hesitate. And the human ships were still there, still in the way, still broadcasting everything to the entire galaxy. The standoff lasted for hours. The Terek could not advance without killing humans. The Solemn could not attack without risking the human ships. And the humans could not leave without abandoning the Solemn to their fate. In the council chamber, the meeting had descended into shouting. Species were taking sides. Some supported the Terek, saying the Solemn had committed crimes against them centuries ago. Others supported the Solemn, pointing out that ancient grudges should not justify current violence. Veshk stood and rang like a bell to get attention. "This is what happens when walls fall," he said. "This is why we maintained the veils. This is why we kept you all apart. But you kept us apart with lies," someone shouted back. "Lies that maintained peace," Veshk replied. The shouting continued. No one could agree. No one had a solution. Back in Solemn space, Taeyang was in his quarters thinking. Mirai found him there as she always did when he was troubled. "I broke something I did not understand," he said. "I saw a wall and thought it was bad, so I knocked it down. I did not think about what it was holding back." "You revealed a truth," Mirai said. "What people do with truth is up to them. People are dying because of that truth. People were dying before. They just died more slowly, separated and alone." Mirai sat next to him. "You cannot unbreak the wall, but maybe you can build something better." "What?" "I do not know. But you will figure it out. You always do." Taeyang stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at the Terek and Solemn fleets frozen in their standoff. At the human ships between them, fragile shields against ancient hatred. Then he understood. Walls separate, he said slowly. But doors connect. What if we build doors instead of walls? Mirai looked at him. What do you mean? The veils were one or the other, either up or down, either separated or not. But what if we build something in between? Places where species can meet if they choose to. Neutral ground, safe ground like embassies, bigger than embassies, trading posts, meeting places, somewhere Terek and Solemn can talk without feeling trapped together, somewhere they can build trust slowly in small steps. Mirai thought about it. It could work. But who would build these places? Who would maintain them? We would, humans. We have no ancient grudges. We have no sides in old wars. We can be neutral. That is a huge responsibility. I knocked down the wall. I should help build what comes next. Taeyang called an emergency meeting with both the Terek and Solemn commanders. Neither wanted to talk, but he was persistent. He kept calling, kept asking, kept knocking on the door until they finally answered. The meeting took place on the Unity on neutral ground. Commander Krish and Defense Coordinator Belash sat on opposite sides of the conference room, refusing to look at each other. Taeyang stood between them. I have a proposal, he said. They both listened, though neither looked happy about it. The old veils are gone. Everyone knows the truth now. We cannot go back. But we can go forward differently. We can build meeting places, exchange stations, neutral zones where any species can come to trade and talk. Why would we trust these stations? Krish asked. Because humans will build and maintain them, and humans gain nothing from your wars. We only want to help you find peace. The Solemn killed our people, Krish said. The Terek destroyed our colonies, Belash replied. Both of those things are true, Taeyang said, and I cannot fix the past, but I can help you build a better future. A future where you choose whether to meet or stay apart, where you have doors, not just walls. There was a long silence. Finally, Belash spoke. If we agree to this, will the Terek stop their attack? Krish hesitated. Then he nodded slowly. If the Solemn agree to meet us fairly, we will consider it. It was not peace, not yet. But it was a beginning. Later that night, after the meeting had ended and the fleets had pulled back, Taeyang stood alone on the Unity's observation deck. He thought about walls and doors, about fear and trust, about knocking and waiting for an answer. Hyunwoo joined him. You took a big risk today, I know. It might not work. They might go to war anyway, I know that too. But at least now they have a choice. Before they only had walls and fear. Now they have doors and possibility. Hyunwoo nodded slowly. You are very stubborn, you know that? Taeyang smiled. Someone once told me that humans do not give up. We keep knocking until the door opens. And if it never opens, then we build a new door. Taeyang Kim stood in front of the most impressive wall he had ever seen. It stretched across space itself, glowing with a soft blue light that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The wall was called a veil, and for 3,000 years, no one had passed through it without permission. The year was 2387. Humans had joined the Galactic Union only 23 years ago, and they were still new to everything. The Union had 47 different alien species, and most of them had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Humans were like children compared to them. Taeyang was 34 years old, and he worked as both a diplomat and an engineer. His job was to help humans understand alien technology and help aliens understand human thinking. Today, he was here for a very important ceremony. The Union Council had agreed to lower 3 veils around human space. This would let humans trade with nearby alien worlds. Next to him stood Mirai Han, his partner and best friend. She was a scientist who studied alien life. She was better than anyone at understanding how aliens thought and felt. Right now, she was excited but also nervous. Behind them, Hyunwoo Park watched everything carefully. He was the security chief of their ship, the Unity. Hyunwoo was 42 and had spent 20 years in the military before joining the diplomatic service. He trusted aliens about as far as he could throw them, which in zero gravity meant not at all. The ceremony was taking place on a huge space station built right next to the veil. Hundreds of aliens filled the observation deck. Some looked like crystals that walked and talked. Others were covered in fur or scales. Some breathed oxygen like humans. Others breathed methane and had to stay in special suits. The ceremony was led by Veshk. an ambassador from the Heckle species. The Heckle looked like walking crystals, and their bodies made soft ringing sounds when they moved. Veshk was old, even by Heckle standards. He had spent his entire life maintaining the veils. Veshk began speaking in the common trade language that most species used. His voice sounded like wind chimes. He talked about the ancient architects, a species that had disappeared long ago. Everyone believed the architects had built the veils to keep the galaxy safe. The veils separated aggressive species from each other, preventing wars that could destroy entire worlds. The technology is beyond our understanding, Veshk said. The architects built these barriers with powers we cannot imagine. We can only maintain them, following the sacred instructions they left behind. We cannot create new veils, and we cannot truly destroy them. We can only lower them or raise them, and even that requires great effort and skill. Taiyang listened politely, but his engineer's mind was working. He looked at the control console near where Veshk stood. It was covered in symbols and lights that pulsed in complex patterns. The console looked old, but it also looked well-maintained. Too well-maintained, perhaps, for technology that was thousands of years old and supposedly impossible to understand. While Veshk continued talking about the sacred nature of the veils, Taeyang found himself walking closer to the console. He had a habit of touching things when he was thinking. His teachers had always complained about it. His hand reached out, and without really thinking about it, he knocked on the side of the console with his knuckles. Tap, tap, tap. The sound echoed strangely. Taeyang's eyes went wide. He knocked again, this time listening carefully. Tap, tap, tap. There was a hollow space behind the panel. The console was not solid all the way through. Mirai noticed the strange look on his face. She knew that look. It meant he had figured something out, or thought he had. She moved next to him quietly and whispered, "What is it?" Taeyang shook his head slightly. Later, he whispered back. The ceremony continued. Veshk pressed his crystal hands against the console, and the symbols began to glow brighter. The veil in front of them started to shimmer and fade. Slowly, over the course of 10 minutes, a section of the wall disappeared. Stars that had been hidden behind the blue glow were now visible. All the aliens in the room made sounds of appreciation. Some clapped, others made clicking noises, and a few released pleasant smells into the air. The humans clapped politely. It was impressive, Taeyang had to admit. But something about it bothered him. After the ceremony ended, there was a reception with food and drinks. Taeyang tried to enjoy it, but his mind kept going back to that hollow sound. Mirai could see him getting more distracted as the evening went on. That night, back on the Unity, Taeyang could not sleep. At 2 a.m, he got up and went to his workshop. He pulled up all the sensor data their ship had collected during the ceremony. He ran analysis after analysis, looking at the veil from every angle their instruments could measure. At 3 a.m, Mirai found him there, surrounded by floating screens full of data. "You are going to tell me what you found, or I am going to be angry," she said. Taeyang looked at her with tired eyes. "I think the veils are fake," he said. Mirai stared at him. "What? Not fake exactly," Taeyang said quickly. "But not what everyone thinks they are. Look at this." He pointed at one of the screens. "This is a deep scan of the veil structure. See these patterns? These are holographic projectors, thousands of them all working together." Mirai moved closer. "Holographic projectors?" "Yes. The blue glow, the way it seems to come from everywhere, that is because it does. It is a 3-dimensional hologram, and behind it, there is a force field, but it is not ancient technology. Look at the energy signature. It matches standard Union shield generators. Very powerful ones, yes, but still just normal force fields." Mirai sat down slowly. "Are you saying the architects did not build the veils?" "I am saying maybe the architects did build the first versions, thousands of years ago, but what we see now, these are replacements, maintained and rebuilt over centuries. The Heckle and other species have been upgrading them, replacing parts, keeping them running. But somewhere along the way, everyone forgot that these are just machines, normal machines that can be understood and controlled. Why would they lie about it?" Mirai asked. "Maybe they are not lying. Maybe they really believe it themselves." Taeyang rubbed his face. "Think about it. If you maintain something for 3,000 years, following the same procedures your ancestors followed, never questioning it because it is sacred, you might forget what it really is. The knowledge gets lost, the mystery grows, and eventually normal technology becomes magic in people's minds." The door opened, Hyunwoo stood there, already fully dressed, even though it was the middle of the night. He never seemed to sleep. I heard voices, he said. Then he saw the screens. What did you find? Taeyang explained his theory again. Hyunwoo listened without interrupting. When Taeyang finished, Hyunwoo was quiet for a long moment. You cannot tell anyone this, Hyunwoo finally said. What? Taeyang and Mirai both said at the same time. Think about it, Hyunwoo said. These veils have kept the peace for 3,000 years, not because they are impossible to break, but because everyone believes they are impossible to break. If you tell people the truth, what happens? Every species with an old enemy will realize there is nothing really stopping them from attacking. The whole galaxy could fall into war. But we cannot just hide the truth, Mirai said. Why not? Hyunwoo asked. Sometimes a comfortable lie is better than a dangerous truth. Taeyang looked at the screens again, at the data that showed the veils were not magical barriers created by ancient gods, but just very good force fields maintained by people who had forgotten they were maintainable. He thought about all the walls in the universe. The physical ones, like the veils. The mental ones, like the belief that some technology was beyond understanding. The social ones, like the barriers between species that never talked to each other because a wall kept them apart. Taeyang had knocked on one wall and found it hollow. Now he had to decide what to do about it. Outside the ship, the veil glowed in the darkness of space, keeping its secrets, holding its position, doing exactly what everyone expected it to do. For now. 5 years passed. Taeyang stood at the window of Exchange Station 17, looking out at the steady stream of ships coming and going. He was 39 now, with a few gray hairs starting to show. Mirai stood beside him, her hand in his. They had married 2 years ago, in a ceremony attended by representatives from 20 different species. The galaxy had changed in those 5 years. 23 species had voluntarily lowered their veils completely. 47 exchange stations operated throughout Union space. Trade had increased by 340%. Scientists from different species were collaborating on research projects. Artists were sharing their cultures. Most importantly, there had been no wars. Not one, not even small conflicts. The Foundation protocol had worked better than anyone had hoped. Taeyang was now the Union's Chief Integration Officer, a position created specifically for him. His job was to help species learn to work together, to knock on doors that remained closed, to build bridges where walls once stood. But today, he was not thinking about past successes. He was thinking about a signal. 3 days ago, long-range sensors had detected something impossible. A transmission from beyond Union space, from a region everyone believed was empty and uninhabitable. The signal was artificial, clearly made by intelligent life. There was another civilization out there, one that had never had contact with the Union, one that had developed in complete isolation. The discovery had sent shockwaves through the council. An emergency meeting was called immediately. Taeyang and Mirai attended the meeting from their station, appearing by hologram in the council chamber. The debate was intense. We should establish a veil immediately, one council member said. Protect both civilizations from each other, others agreed. It was the safe choice, the cautious choice. Put up a wall and keep the unknown at a distance. But Veshk stood up. His crystal body rang with purpose. 5 years ago, we learned that walls are not the answer. We learned to build doors instead. Now we want to put up a wall again just because we are afraid? This is different, someone argued. We know nothing about this civilization. They could be dangerous. We knew nothing about humans 5 years ago, Veshk replied, and they taught us everything we needed to know about trust. The debate continued for hours. Finally, the council asked Taeyang directly, "What do you think we should do?" Taeyang took a deep breath. "I think we should knock. Yes, send a simple signal. 3 pulses, evenly spaced. The universal pattern of a knock. A way of saying we are here, we see you, we want to talk. And if they do not respond peacefully," someone asked, "then at least we tried." Taeyang looked around the chamber at all the different species. 5 years ago, many of you were separated by walls. You believed those walls were necessary. Now you trade with each other, work with each other. Some of you are even friends. That happened because someone knocked on the wall and found it was hollow. This is different, came the argument again. This is not a wall we built. This is a natural barrier of distance and ignorance. All walls are built, Taeyang replied. By distance, by fear, by choice, or by accident. But they are all still just walls. and walls can have doors, the council voted. It was close, but in the end they agreed. Humanity would lead a peaceful first contact mission. They would knock on this new door and wait for a response. 2 weeks later, the Unity prepared for departure. The ship had been upgraded over the years, but it was still the same vessel that had arrived at the first Veil 5 years ago. Now it would travel farther than any Union ship had gone before. The crew was mixed now. Humans, yes, but also Hekel, Solem, Tarek, and 7 other species. All volunteers who wanted to be part of this historic moment. Hyunwoo was still the security chief, older now but no less watchful. Sora had become the ship's tactical officer permanently. Yuna managed all communications. The team that had helped prevent a war 5 years ago was together again. On the day of departure, Mirai had news. She took Taeyang aside in their quarters and told him privately. "I am pregnant," she said. Taeyang stared at her, then broke into a huge smile. He hugged her tightly. "Are you sure you want to come on this mission?" he asked. "It could be dangerous, I am sure." She smiled. "Our child will be born into a galaxy without walls. That is worth any risk." The Unity departed with cheers and well wishes from thousands of beings at the station. Ships from different species formed an honor guard, escorting them to the edge of Union space. Then the Unity was alone, traveling into the unknown. It took 3 weeks to reach the location where the signal had originated. During that time, the crew prepared. They studied the signal, analyzed it for patterns, tried to understand the civilization that had sent it. The signal was mathematical, built on prime numbers and geometric patterns. It was clearly an attempt at communication, a message saying we are intelligent, we are here, we see the universe. When they arrived at the coordinates, they found a small outpost on a barren moon. The outpost was old, maybe centuries old, but still functioning. It was broadcasting the signal automatically over and over, like a lighthouse in the darkness of space. But there were no ships, no signs of current habitation. Just the signal endlessly repeating. "It is an invitation," Mirai said. "They built this and left it here, hoping someone would find it." "So where are they?" Hyunwoo asked. Sora traced the signal back to its source. 3 systems away. That is where they live. The Unity moved closer, cautiously. As they approached the system, they detected ships. Lots of them. A busy, thriving civilization. Taeyang stood on the bridge looking at the screen showing the alien ships. They were beautiful, designed in ways no Union species had thought of. Different but not wrong. "Just different, send the knock," he said. Yuna sent the signal. 3 pulses of radio waves evenly spaced, in the same pattern as their mathematical message. Tap, 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 then they waited. The wait was agony. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Then 2 hours. The alien ships had definitely detected them, but there was no response. "Maybe we should leave," Hyunwoo suggested. "We tried. They do not want to talk." Taeyang thought about all the doors he had knocked on over the years. Some had opened immediately. Some had taken time. Some had stayed closed. "We wait," he said. "We knocked. Now we wait for them to decide if they want to answer." 3 hours after the knock, a signal came back. 3 pulses, just like theirs. Tap, 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 then a 4th pulse. And a 5th. And a 6th. "They are continuing the pattern," Yuna said excitedly. "It is like a conversation. We knocked, they knocked back, and now they are asking us to continue." Taeyang smiled. "Send the next sequence." Over the next week, they built a language together. Simple at first, just mathematical patterns. Then more complex, adding concepts like distance, time, peace, meeting. Finally, an alien ship approached the Unity. It was small, just a shuttle, and it moved slowly, cautiously. It docked with the Unity's airlock after both sides agreed on safety protocols. The airlock door opened. 3 beings stood there. They were roughly humanoid in shape, but covered in what looked like flowing robes made of light itself. Their faces were hard to see clearly, as if they existed slightly out of phase with normal space. Taeyang stepped forward. He had no weapons, just a translator device and hope. One of the beings stepped forward as well. They stood facing each other across the threshold. Then the being did something that surprised everyone. It reached out and knocked on the airlock doorframe. 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. Taeyang laughed, surprised and delighted. He knocked back, tap, tap, tap. Through the translator, they managed basic communication. The beings called themselves the Lumini. They had been alone for so long, waiting for someone to find their beacon. They had built it 1,000 years ago, hoping, dreaming that somewhere in the vast universe someone else existed, and someone had come. Someone had knocked. Over the next months, relationships were built. The Unity stayed in Lumini space, learning and teaching. More ships came from Union space, bringing representatives from different species. Exchange Station 48 was built in neutral space between the Union and the Lumini, the first station designed with help from an entirely new civilization. One evening, as construction on the new station neared completion, Taeyang stood at the airlock of the Unity, looking out at the work. Mirai joined him, her pregnancy now showing clearly. "You are still knocking on things," she said, watching him absently tap his knuckles against the airlock door. He looked down at his hand and smiled. "Someone has to. Doors do not open themselves. Do you think there are more walls out there? More species waiting to be found? Definitely. The universe is huge. There are probably millions of civilizations, all separated by distance or fear or ignorance, all behind walls they built themselves or that were built for them. And you want to knock on all of them?" Taeyang thought about it. About the first knock on the Veil console, the hollow sound that had started everything. About all the doors that had opened since then. About the galaxy transforming from a place of walls and fear to a place of exchange and possibility. "Not me," he said, "but maybe our child will, and their children, and all the children of all the species going out into the universe and knocking on walls until they become doors." Mirai put her hand on her belly. "A universe without walls. That is a good dream." 6 months after the attack, Taeyang stood in front of the Union Council again. This time he was not alone. With him were Do-hyun Kang, a 45-year-old architect who had designed buildings on 3 continents on Earth. Next to Do-hyun stood Yoonji Park, a 38-year-old psychologist who specialized in how different species communicated. Behind them were engineers, scientists, and diplomats, all human, all ready to help. On the screens around the chamber, plans and designs floated in 3 dimensions. They showed something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. "I call it the Foundation Protocol," Taeyang said. His voice was calm but firm. "The old veils kept you apart with force. The Foundation Protocol will give you the choice to meet or stay separate. It is built on trust, not fear." The council members watched as the designs rotated on the screens. They showed space stations, enormous and beautiful, floating in neutral zones between territories. The stations had docking bays for every kind of ship, atmosphere zones for every kind of breathing, and gravity sections for every kind of body. "We call them exchange stations," Do-hyun explained. "They are neutral ground. No weapons allowed. No territorial claims. Just places where species can meet, trade, talk, and maybe become friends." "Who would control these stations?" someone asked from the council floor. "Humanity would build and maintain them," Taeyang said. "We would be caretakers, not owners. Any species could use them freely. Why should we trust you?" another voice asked. "Because we have nothing to gain from your conflicts," Mirai answered. She stepped forward to join Taeyang. "We are new to the galaxy. We have no old grudges, no ancient enemies. We can be neutral because we must be neutral." Veshk stood up. His crystal body no longer rang with anger. Instead, he sounded thoughtful. "The humans broke down our walls. Perhaps it is right that they should help us build doors." The debate lasted for hours. Some species loved the idea immediately. Others were suspicious. A few refused entirely, saying they wanted nothing to do with their old enemies. Taeyang listened to all of them. Then he said something that surprised everyone. "We do not ask you to tear down your houses. We only ask you to install doors. If you never want to open those doors, that is your choice. But the doors will be there when you are ready." The simple metaphor seemed to help. It was something everyone could understand. Houses with doors. Not prisons, not walls, but homes where you could choose to welcome guests or stay private. After 3 days of debate, the council agreed to let humans build the first 10 exchange stations. It would be a test. If they worked, more would follow. If they failed, the project would end. Construction began immediately. Do-hyun led the design teams. He created stations that were beautiful but also practical. Each one had multiple sections, so species could stay in their comfort zones. But the central areas were shared spaces, designed to encourage interaction. Yoonji worked on the protocols for how species would interact. She studied how different aliens communicated and created guidelines that helped prevent misunderstandings. Simple things like knowing that heckle rang louder when happy, not angry, or that solemn silence meant agreement, not disapproval. The first exchange station opened 8 months after the council meeting. It floated in the space between Terek and Solemn territories, exactly in the middle. Neither species controlled it. Both could visit it. For the first week, nobody came. Taeyang waited patiently. He knew trust took time. You could not force species to interact any more than you could force a door to open. You could only make the door available and wait. On the 8th day, a single Solemn merchant ship docked at the station. The captain was cautious, ready to leave at the first sign of danger. But there was no danger. Just humans offering a place to rest and trade. On the 10th day, a Terek trader arrived. The Solemn merchant was still there. They saw each other across the main trading floor. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Taeyang walked up to both of them. He invited them to eat together in the station's dining area. Both refused at first. But Taeyang was persistent. He kept asking, kept knocking on that door. Finally, they agreed. The meal was awkward. The Solemn and Terek sat at opposite ends of a table, with Taeyang and Mirai in the middle. Nobody spoke much at first. The silence was heavy with centuries of distrust. Then Taeyang did something very human. He started talking about food. "This is a traditional Korean dish from Earth," he said, pointing to his plate. "My grandmother used to make it. Every species has foods that remind them of home, right?" The Solemn merchant nodded slowly. "My mother made a soup with purple herbs. I have not tasted it in years." The Terek trader clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "We have a bread that is only made during festivals. It takes 3 days to prepare." Food was something everyone understood. Everyone had memories connected to meals. Everyone missed the tastes of home. By the end of the meal, the Solemn and Terek were not friends, but they were talking. And that was enough for a start. Word spread about the exchange station. More ships began to visit. Not many at first, but a steady trickle. Merchants saw opportunity. Diplomats saw possibility. Scientists saw a chance to share knowledge. One of the visitors was a young Terek named Thrix. He had lost family in the attack on Solemn territory. He came to the station because he wanted to understand why humans had protected the Solemn. Why humans had gotten in the way. Taeyang met with him privately. They talked for hours. "You cost my brother his life," Thrix said. "The attack had to stop because of you humans. My brother was recalled before he could finish his mission. Now he lives with shame. Would you rather he had killed more Solemn?" Taeyang asked gently. "They killed our people first, and before that your people killed theirs. And before that they killed yours." Taeyang leaned forward. "When does it end, Thrix? How many dead is enough?" Thrix had no answer. "On Earth," Taeyang continued, "we had wars for thousands of years. Humans killed humans over land, resources, beliefs, revenge. We had every reason to keep fighting forever. But eventually we realized something. Peace does not mean forgetting the past. It means choosing not to repeat it." "That is easy for you to say," Thrix replied. "You have no enemies here." "True, but we have enemies on Earth. We still have conflicts and disagreements. The difference is we built ways to solve them without war." Taeyang gestured around the station. "This is one of those ways. Not the only way, but a start." Thrix stayed on the station for a week. He watched Terek and Solemn traders negotiate deals. He saw scientists from both species share research. He even saw 2 children, one Terek and one Solemn, playing together in the station's recreation area. When he left, he was not fully convinced. But he was thinking. And sometimes that was enough. More exchange stations opened. The second one was between Heckle Space and a species called the Rinwi. The third connected 4 different territories. Each station had its own character, its own community, its own stories of species learning to interact. Not everything went smoothly. There were fights. There were misunderstandings. One station had to be evacuated when 2 species nearly started a riot over a trade dispute. But the stations stayed open. Humans kept maintaining them, kept mediating disputes, kept knocking on doors and asking species to try again. A year after the first station opened, Veshk visited one. He had been resistant to the idea at first, but now he wanted to see the results for himself. Taeyang gave him a tour. They walked through the trading floors, the research laboratories, the dining areas. They watched species interact. Some conversations were awkward, but they were happening. At the end of the tour, Veshk stood at one of the viewing windows, looking out at space. "We maintained walls for 3,000 years, he said quietly. "We thought we were keeping the peace, but maybe we were just keeping species afraid." "You did what you thought was right," Taeyang replied. "And you showed us a better way." Veshk turned to face him. "The Heckle will support the Foundation protocol fully. We will help you build more stations. It was a huge decision. The Heckle were respected throughout the Union. Their support meant everything." That night, Taeyang and Mirai sat together in their quarters on the station. They had been working non-stop for over a year. They were tired but satisfied. "Do you think it is really working?" Mirai asked. Taeyang thought about it. "The stations are full. Species are trading. Some are even making friends. No major conflicts in over a year." He smiled. "Yes, I think it is working." Mirai leaned against him. "You knocked on a wall and changed the galaxy. We changed it," he corrected. "All of us. Humans together." They sat in comfortable silence, watching ships dock and depart from the station. Each ship carried people who were choosing to interact with species they had once feared. Each ship was proof that walls could be replaced with doors. But even as the stations succeeded, Taeyang knew the work was not finished. The galaxy was large. There were still species that refused to interact. Still barriers that needed to become doors. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a question was forming. If knocking on one wall had changed so much, what would happen if they knocked on all of them? He looked at Mirai and saw she was thinking the same thing. "There are more walls to knock on," she said. He nodded. "Yes, many more." "Then we should start knocking."